Hey, here it is. It's your favorite time of the month. It's me, Ken Pfalzgraf, Acton, Agua, Dulce school board member, doing my monthly update, my recap, whatever you want to call it, this time for my 5th month on the board. Yeah, I made it that long. April 2017. Hey, before we get going this month, I want to give a special thanks to this month's sponsor, Van Zandt Jewelers. At Van Zandt, we got what you need. Short on cash? Don't know where the next dollar's coming from? Hey, don't worry about it. When everyone else says no, Van Zandt finds a way. Just in time for Mother's Day, we've got a great selection of ankle bracelets. Be the hit of the beach. Come on in, visit any of our Tri-County locations, including our newest store at the Pear Blossom Little Rock location. All right, again, thanks. All right, Van Zandt Jewelers, thanks for sponsoring April 2017. Now let's get serious. So many of you may know that the superintendent of the school district here resigned just prior, literally just prior to me being seated at the first board meeting in December. Since then, we've had an interim superintendent kind of at the helm. 3 of the 5 board members decided to keep the old superintendent on as a consultant to basically fill several roles. 2 of the most important are construction at Acton School and budget development. Many of you know it's always been my position that we remain cognizant of how heavy our top end is in the district. We know, even in the most recent budget study session, we see that our enrollment hovers right around 1,100 students. It's done that for about the last 3 or 4 years. And so it doesn't seem to be gaining, and that's just a matter of the demographic here. We've become highly dependent on charter school income to supplement the revenue we have from other more traditional sources. And so I've talked about that in other videos, and I don't even want to get into that, but let's just say that I'm really cognizant of how heavy the top end gets if enrollment isn't increasing, and especially if the income from the charter schools becomes volatile, and it is doing that right now. Now, to keep finances in order, some smaller school districts take up the tactic of having, say, the superintendent be the high school principal. That position is supported by the dean, and so on and so forth. In the smallest districts, you might see the superintendent as the principal of all the schools, and then takes on some of the financial duties and administrative duties as well. So it's all a matter of keeping things in line with what you can afford, because the higher your top end, the less money actually goes into the classroom where the students are. Now, what I've asked the superintendent to do, or the interim superintendent, is as part of her idea about how she's going to guide the district, which gives the board an indicator of how effective they will be in the role, is to give an organizational chart that describes what the top end of the organization looks like. Now, the board has not really had the chance to see what the interim superintendent will do as the superintendent, because, again, we've got the ex-superintendent consulting at the insistence of 3 board members, and I really believe that that relationship has to be weaned off, and the influence of that consultant on Acton school construction and the budget development needs to be addressed. I certainly wouldn't want to be the leader of an organization that had a consultant developing the budget that was going to take me through the next fiscal year, the first year of my role as a superintendent. So enough about that. But what I've asked is, once we finally can see the interim superintendent take charge, I've asked that they lay out their organizational chart. Now, I'm making some assumptions here, but what I've seen so far is the interim superintendent has a dependence on the site principals beyond just being a site principal. In fact, a few months ago, when the site principals were given pay increases, retroactive pay increases, and their title changed to site director, that was kind of a hint that their role may be beyond running the day-to-day things at their specific site and sitting in their office waiting for bad kids like me to come in and need some help from the principal. So what I'm actually seeing is I'm seeing some of the principal slash site directors having secondary specialties such as curriculum development or curriculum, looking at the new curriculum systems that are coming in. You've got one that seems to have a background in developing the LCAP program, and you've got yet another one that is up on technology. So what I've asked the superintendent or the interim superintendent to do is to give the board a presentation about what it means in this district to be a principal slash site director. And I think what we're going to find out is instead of having 6 or 8 positions at the top end with each of those IT functions or curriculum development or LCAP and funding, that you're actually seeing a combination of roles, and that is really important in keeping costs down, especially if the charter income tanks and we're right back to where we have been with funding on 1,100 students. So when that happens, I'll give you an update. Hey, are you the Vasquez Mustang? Well, you're not made out of concrete. Never mind. Hello, excuse me, sir. Are you the Vasquez Mustang? I don't guess you are. You know, if you know anything about the Vasquez Mustang, dude, there's like money in it for you, you know what I mean? You can call me if you want. All right, let's talk a little bit about construction. You'll remember that last month I talked about contracting with the district, what it takes to do business with the district, whether you're a consultant, a contractor, or a product supplier. There are certain things that need to be in place so the district is protected from liability. The same thing goes for construction. Now, why am I talking about construction right now? Well, there's been a lot of construction. There is a lot of construction going on in the district. You'll remember phase 1, phase 2 of the high school in which the gymnasium was built, and now plans have been submitted for phase 3, which is an athletic complex. Why do I have such a keen interest in construction? Well, because I am the board clerk this year, and the board clerk actually signs a final submittal paper that goes to the state to say, the school is finished or the construction project is finished and it's been finished and inspected and everything is in order. And I don't just take that responsibility lightly. I always call to make sure that all the permits are in order before I make a recommendation to the board that I'm actually going to sign that. That's what I did on phase 2 of the high school before I signed that paper. In public sector construction, again, remember, you're dealing with taxpayer money, public money. So this isn't, I'm just deciding to do something at my home. There are rules and there are considerations. And I've listed a few of them here. There's planning, funding, construction, inspection and compliance, and there's liabilities that go with each of these. Let's talk a little bit about each one. The first one, planning, that's pretty simple. You've heard people say that government moves at the pace of a snail, and that's pretty true. Along those lines, most good organizations, especially public organizations, have 5-year plans where they're doing projections. You can call it a 5-year plan, you can call it a capital improvement project budget, but you're informing your process typically 5 years out. In education, planning means I'm looking at my enrollment, I'm looking at my facilities, I'm looking at a number of things, and informing my plan, or coming to number 2, the funding I will need to make sure that everything is in place. I'm keeping my facilities up, and I'm anticipating, say, a rise in enrollment so I can service the students that come with that rise. You want to remember, in the funding area, there are no surprises. We're not going to Vegas tonight to pull the handle to get the school $3 or $4 million out of nowhere. Nobody's going to win the lotto, and you're just kind of looking at the things that come with your school, the typical funding sources that say, for each student I have and their circumstances, I'm going to get this much money, and we're seeing trends here, and that's going to inform our funding, which is going to inform our planning. Now, the thing I haven't talked about is a bond. In new construction, I can go out, or if, let's say, I'm going to redo some things and modernize things, which is very different than beautification. I may go out and get a bond, and that's what happened in this community, where a bond was formed. We're assessed a value each year, and that's what built the high school. Okay, let's talk about actual construction. You have to have the planning out of the way, and you have to have the funding out of the way. Why? Because while construction is going on, before it's going on, and even after it's happened, there are inspections and compliances that are required. For example, in school construction, you have what's called the DSA, Department of State Architect, and they have to approve most things that come with school construction. So, if I'm planning and funding, I know that some of the things I'm going to do, and we're going to break this down a little bit more in a bit. There's typical maintenance, there's modernization, there's beautification, and there's new construction. Each one of those has a different set of requirements when it comes to the DSA. Now, ahead of these projects, you know that you're going to need some involvement from the DSA. And the more complicated the project, or the more evolved it is, aside from painting a wall that's dirty or possibly changing some carpet or something like that, you know that you're going to have to make submittals to DSA. So if you have a project that you plan and fund to be completed by X date, you know that DSA is not sitting there waiting for you to submit your plan and then jumping all over it. Again, government moves at the pace of a snail. So you have to make these submittals ahead of time. Sometimes 6 months on major projects. So while the project is going on, again, depending on what type of project it is, inspectors who are certified by DSA will come out, they'll look at the progress. This is all in specifications. So you have an architect that writes the specifications, you make your submittal, they're approved by DSA. DSA makes sure that there's an inspection protocol and a compliance protocol with the construction. And this is happening before, during, and right up to the sign-off that comes to me that I call DSA, and I say, is all this stuff in order? Are we compliant? Now, what happens if somebody doesn't involve DSA and it's a project that requires the involvement of DSA? Well, that's bad news, because DSA can come in and shut your project down. They can say, hey, this used to be a classroom, this used to be another classroom, this used to be a library, you've torn all that out, you've done electrical work, you've done plumbing work, you've done modifications, whether they're load-bearing walls or not load-bearing walls, but you've changed the whole configuration, you've changed traffic flow within the building, maybe even outside the building, and they're saying, no, you did not go through the proper protocol and get this designed and approved prior to starting work. And that turns into liabilities. You've got people that may be expecting to use a facility. You've got public trust where people are saying, really, what are you doing? You know what these rules are. Anyway, back to this. So let's say you don't get DSA approval on the project, and it's deemed that it required DSA approval. Well, that's bad news. First off, somebody can walk into the building and get hurt, fall down, or you might even have some shyster walk in the building that knows that this is happening and pretend to get hurt. And guess what? The school district is at risk. Even beyond that, the individual board members who oversee the superintendent and the recommendations the superintendent makes are personally at risk. They have liability. And believe you me, why do I call to make sure that all the DSA approvals are in order, all the inspections are in order before I sign the form as the clerk? Well, first, I have a responsibility to the 1,100 kids who go to school in this district, and that's number one. And secondly, I'm not going to give away the financial stability of my family just because someone has decided to jump through hoops and go around and call something it isn't when it really is. So at the end of the day, believe you me, I don't care who calls DSA to find out if it's permitted. I'm going to call DSA myself before the doors open up to accept students. And I don't care if those students are our local students or we're renting the facility out to charter partners that come in to service our students during the summertime or something like that. It's just not happening. If the other board members decide to let that happen, that's on you, but I'm going to be very vocal about this kind of thing because there are regulations. If you're going to be in the business, follow the regulations. Now, using one of the sayings of one of my fellow board members, hey, before everybody starts running around with their hair on fire, let's talk a little bit about where DSA comes in. And there are 4 areas of construction we need to talk about. 1 is maintenance, 2 is beautification, 3 is modernization, and 4 is new construction. Now, in the case of maintenance, you've got painting, you've got weather stripping on windows, you've got, I could list a number of things, changing light bulbs, fixing a hole in the wall, something that's damaged, patching a parking lot. Those are typical everyday maintenance things. The next is beautification. Let's say I want to plant new landscape bushes, or I want to change the type of grass, or I want to do some work on the athletic field, grading or top dressing, or I want to add maybe the Vasquez Mustang to the high school where it used to be, things like that. Those are beautification projects. They don't typically involve moving walls, ripping out rooms, changing configuration, changing travel paths, all that kind of thing. It's just, we're not changing light bulbs and painting, but we're going beyond that to make sure that everything looks good. Typically, you don't see DSA coming in on these things, but your architect, big school districts have architects, we hire one, so you would simply go to those people and say, hey, which parts of these projects require the oversight of DSA? And they have professional credibility and liability. If they tell you no, well, then you have a recourse if they're wrong. Now, when you start getting into modernization, you're changing things that maybe have had some code changes, that type of thing. So we're talking about plumbing, we're talking about changing pathways of travel. DSA wants to know if there's an emergency, is there an unimpeded and approved path for people to get where they're going? They want to know, do you have enough space? There's a square footage calculation. There's somebody I know in town that's built a lot of schools, and they're deep into this, and they'll tell me, well, you need this many square feet for each student at this age level and this grade level. So all those things come into consideration. And again, your designer, your district architect, and certainly the superintendent's got to be smart enough to know what is what and what is not. Now, a new construction, that's a no-brainer. You're starting off with maybe tearing something down like the old gym, you're putting something new there. This is a no-brainer. This is DSA all the way. And so if you're changing, let's say you have a fence configuration where there's posts, or you're tearing out an old playground and you're putting a brand new playground, anything that has footing, or you're putting utilities underground, this is a no-brainer. So I'll close out this section by letting you know you have my commitment as the board clerk that I know what this is. I mean, I've done projects at work. I work in the public sector. I know what informing the budget is. I know what capital improvement planning is years out. I know what the requirements are. I know what they're not. If I don't know, I go to the right people. I go to the city attorney. I go to risk management. I go to finance, and I make sure things are in order, because at the end of the day, the district can't afford liability, and we can't have people coming onto the board and then expecting them to, due to someone's reputation or making sure everyone's hair doesn't start on fire, that I'm going to accept liability for something that's just not acceptable. So at the end of the day, on any construction that happens in this district, as long as I'm on the board, I'm going to be asking questions about the bid process, the planning process, the compliance and inspection process, and finally, does the clerk really have the ability to sign off on a project that's been completed and done in the proper protocol? My crystal ball is telling me we are going to be talking more about this subject in the very near future. First one goes to my favorite third grade teacher who helped me find this. My second shout out is to you, my favorite cowboy, Anthony Mann. Anthony Mann, thank you for using your vast construction background and experience to keep an eye on our campuses. Thanks to your second set of eyes, our site principals have everything it takes to keep things safe, sound, and tidy. Thanks, dude. All right, that's enough of the mushy stuff. I'm a busy man. I got things to do. You want to remember, I'm Ken Pfalzgraf. I'm nobody else. I represent what I think, not what anybody else thinks. Now, that said, see these down here? Again, the housekeeping thing. Like, dislike, comment, and subscribe. You know you want to be notified as soon as this quality entertainment comes out. See you soon.